morning, good afternoon. Welcome to today's presentation, Mental Distress and Resettlement, Improving RAPS Model of Service for Clients in Mental Distress. Before we begin our presentation today, we would like to begin with an acknowledgement that N4 is hosted at CHEO, which is located in Ottawa, Ontario. Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and we honor them and this land. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We also honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. My name is Colleen Drake. I am N4's Project Engagement Coordinator, and I will be hosting and moderating today's presentation with my colleague and co-host Andrew Tomeyer, N4's Education Coordinator, who will be monitoring the Q&A box today. I am now pleased to introduce you to today's presenters, and I'm going to ask that our presenters turn on their video as I introduce them. In her role as an assistant manager, Paulicia DeGans oversees interpreter services, health equity research, and the Immigrant and Refugee Mental Health Project. Prior to CAMH, Paulicia worked at Addictions and Mental Health Ontario, where she led equity, anti-racism, anti-oppression, diversity, and inclusion initiatives across the entire addiction and mental health sector, using a systems-level approach. Paulicia has held a variety of health equity, policy, and public health roles at prominent organizations, including the Canadian Cancer Society, Ontario Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, Ontario Ministry of Labour, the Durham Region Health Department, the University of Ottawa Health Services, and the Canadian Red Cross. Paulicia completed her master's in public health at the University of Toronto and graduated with distinction with a Bachelor's of Health Science from the University of Ottawa. Welcome, Paulicia. With deep passion for mental health, equity, and strong commitment to data-driven solutions, Mercedes Sobers is Research and Evaluation Coordinator for the Office of Health Equity at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. In her role at CAMH and through her commitment to social advocacy, Mercedes uses research to improve equitable access to healthcare for those who live in Ontario. Mercedes is also pursuing her PhD in epidemiology. As a doctoral candidate, Mercedes is constantly expanding her knowledge and honing her skills to conduct impactful research. Welcome, Mercedes. Jack Williams is a graduate of the University of Newcastle, Australia, and research analyst, postgraduate program at Humber College. He has worked with youth experiencing homelessness as a case manager, providing support in all areas, including housing, employment, and immigration. Working with the Center for Addiction and Mental Health's Office of Health Equity as a research analyst, Jack works on improving RAP's model of service for clients in mental distress, creating an online, self-directed training guide. Jack has interest in conducting research in the fields of mental health, housing, immigration, and homelessness. Welcome, Jack. Welcome to you all. And please note, our presenters do not have any conflicts of interest to disclose at this time. So I just have a few housekeeping slides and then we'll jump into the presentation. So today's session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our N4 platform. We will share this with you as soon as it becomes available. Should there be any technical issues during this presentation, we will inform you with details for an alternate makeup date. N4 is pleased to announce that today's webinar is accredited. Members of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, the Canadian Psychological Association CPA, and the Canadian College of Health Leaders CCHL earn credits towards their maintenance of certification requirements by attending today's webinar. Royal College members receive one continuing education credit for attending. CPA members receive one credit as well. and CCHL members receive zero point 0.5 Category 2 credits for attending this webinar. Before we begin today's event, I would like to take a moment to introduce you to our platform features, which help enhance your participant experience. Throughout today's session, we invite you to write your questions in the Q&A window. We know that sometimes many of you might have the same questions or be interested in particular response. Today, you have the option of upvoting a question. Please upvote questions you're interested in hearing the answer to, and we will prioritize those questions to our speakers. And with that said, let's jump right into today's presentation. And I'm happy to pass the virtual podium over to our presenters. Thank you.
Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. Can everyone see the slides here? Okay. Let's move on to the next slide. Thank you, Jack. So here's a little bit of an agenda of what we're going to go through today. To introduce folks to the topic, we're going to give some background and context, and then I'll turn it over to Mercedes to give a bit of an overview of our research project specifically. Jack, who was our research analyst, is going to speak a little bit more around phase 1 of our research project. And then Mercedes will go into the training guide, which is an online tool that's been developed as a result of our research findings. And then lastly, I'll speak around next steps and what folks can anticipate out of this research project. Next slide, please. So first, let's get started with some background and context. So really to set the stage, I know a lot of folks here on the call are very familiar with some of these stats, but just to set the stage, in 2022, more than 5 million people in Canada met the diagnostic criteria for mood, anxiety, or substance use disorder. And of the 15% of Canadians that say they needed mental health support in 2021 to 2022, over half reported not having had those needs met. And there's significant economic costs associated with mental illness in Canada that's estimated to be around $51 billion per year. And more than 2 million Canadians have a mental health related disability, and less than half are employed. So you can see from the data here within the Canadian context, there's a great need for better mental health supports. And our hope through this research project is to help fill some of that gap. Next slide, please. Some further information around what we know around the current state is that economic and social conditions affect mental health. We must consider there are several social determinants of health, including the migration journey. Intersectionality affects discrimination and privilege. And so how people self-identify, intersect with each other, and shape various advantages people have or disadvantages people have. And specifically for immigrants and refugees, this has an implication as well and impacts their mental health. When we think about the social determinants of health, the in-transit and the post-migration context, the social determinants have been consistently identified as the most important factors affecting the mental health of immigrants and refugees. However, thinking about a strengths-based approach, refugees are resilient. Psychological problems are not often mental illnesses themselves, but do impact settlement and thriving. And sometimes folks just need to get access to the correct resources in order to be able to thrive. Some of the most effective responses focus on mental health promotion and illness prevention, as well as developing appropriate pathways to care. So thinking about how we can connect to the correct resources for people to be able to thrive. Next slide, please. A little bit about us at CAMH for folks who are not aware of who we are. We're Canada's largest mental health teaching hospital and one of the world's leading mental health research centers. And we are fully affiliated with the University of Toronto and is a Pan-American health organization / World Health Organization collaborating center. The Office of Health Equity situates itself within CAMH, and we make a continuous effort to reduce disparities with the ultimate goal of eliminating disparities in mental health through community collaborations, internal initiatives, including our Immigrant and Refugee Mental Health Project, which is funded by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, or IRCC. A little bit about the Office of Health Equity. this research project we're talking about specifically today falls into one of our major buckets of the work we do in the Office of Health Equity. So we develop research and evaluation to build evidence around addressing health inequities. We also provide education and training to support internally at the hospital. And also we have our education and training, for example, with the Immigrant Refugee Mental Health Project, which is something we offer externally as well. Internally, we also help to support folks be able to access interpretation services. And so thinking about how that impacts immigrants and refugees, sometimes English is not the language that folks would like to receive health information. So we help to make sure that clients across the hospital get access to interpreters in their language of choice. And also within the hospital, we coordinate strategic initiatives. So as an entire system, we are advancing health equity collectively. Next slide, please. So I spoke a little bit of an introduction around one of our other initiatives we hold in the Office of Health Equity, which is our Immigrant and Refugee Mental Health Project, which I encourage folks who are not already aware of this project to check it out. This is a bilingual, evidence-based capacity building initiative designed to enhance the knowledge, skills, and networks of service providers, both health providers and social service providers, to appropriately respond to the unique mental health needs of immigrants and refugees. Our Immigrant Refugee Mental Health Project offers online training, tools, and resources to settlement, social, and health service providers. And on the right-hand side here is an image you're seeing, which kind of describes the 5 different buckets of areas where the IRMHP covers. So we have free online courses. Through our online courses, we also have a community of practice, meaning that folks can connect with other professionals, ask a question to our subject matter experts around what they're seeing on the front line. But if you aren't able to enroll in our courses or aren't able to commit to the community of practice, we also have a monthly newsletter that goes out, which you'll get further information around emerging needs. We also have monthly webinars. So if there's a particular topic that you're really interested in, you can attend those. And we also have a toolkit of resources for folks who want to learn a little bit more about how to better support immigrant and refugee mental health. That is available to you as well. And so through our project, you have the opportunity to connect and exchange ideas and also obtain advice from experts in the field, also through a community of practice. Next slide, please. So to provide a little bit of context about some of the things we have achieved year to date related to our Immigrant and Refugee Mental Health Project, we've had over 20,000 people across the health, settlement, and social service provider sector enrolled in our online courses. We've had over 19,000 folks enrolled in our webinars, 13,000 folks visit our toolkit, and over 13,000 people also subscribe to our newsletter, with almost 12,000 people enrolled in our community of practice. And these numbers continue to increase. All that to say that these are resources that are available to you to help further your learning that we offer out of the Office of Health Equity, and would encourage you, if it's of interest, to check out some of these resources as well. For folks who are trying to understand what does this course mean and what are some of the things that are enrolled in the course, it is a course that includes 10 modules. It takes around 35 hours to complete, but you have a 6-week span to complete that, and it's self-paced. And so in the recent few years, we have expanded the course according to what we heard was needs from the sector. So previously it was just 7 modules, but now we've expanded it out to be 10. So I'll bring your attention to the bottom half of the list of modules here. We heard in our evaluations that folks self-identified as being immigrants themselves, and really self-identified with identifying with the racialized groups, et cetera, and really wanting to better understand how they can take care of themselves also. And so for that reason, we decided to develop information so people can further learn about health equity, service delivery and pathways to care, partnerships and self-care, so help to fill the gap related to what people found they needed in terms of information to better deliver care to immigrants and refugees. And this image here provides a little bit of context in terms of the reach of the course. So you'll see that Ontario, British Columbia has higher numbers of people enrolled, but more people live in those provinces. But one of our goals really is ensuring that we have access across the entire country. And so we put caps on how many people are allowed to enroll in Ontario and British Columbia to ensure that the other provinces and territories are able to get into our course. Seeing our really high numbers, they fill up quite quickly. So if anyone on the call here is interested in this course, know that is not Ontario-centric. Despite us, CAMH, being in Toronto itself, we really are focused on national reach. And another course that recently has been developed, and we are currently offering it with our next offering taking place in the new year, is a leadership course. So we recognize that our larger course, it takes around 35 hours, is specific to frontline staff. But we know there's a gap when thinking within organizations and systems around how do leaders and board members of organizations serving immigrants, refugees, how can they help to advance equity and better meet the needs of immigrants and refugees? And so this is a leadership course. It takes around 3 hours to complete. It also is available for 6 weeks and is self-paced. And the focus of this course is across different levels that a leader should consider. Thinking about how to embed health equity at the organizational level. How do you address health equity with your staff and how to support your staff specifically? How do you make change at the service level as a leader? And then also further resources and tools that you can leverage as a leader to advance this work. And so we pilot tested it last fiscal year, had some great results from that, integrated the feedback, and are currently running it right now. So if anyone's interested, our next iteration is in February of next year. So feel free to keep an eye out for that. And I'll turn it over to Mercedes to give a little bit of an overview of the RAP research project specifically.
Yeah, thanks, Felicia. So hi, everyone. So now I'm going to dive right into the RAP research project by starting a bit with some background and context on how this project came to be. Thanks, Jack. And so in our interactions with our partners or those who are settling government and system refugees, something that we were hearing is that RAP service providers were not funded to provide mental health services. And that there was a lack of services available for their clients. And so to give you some context, government assistant refugees often go to these RAP centers, and RAP centers and RAP workers will help settle them into the new community that they're in. If someone has a mental illness, and that's a very clear referral pathway in that they can refer to mental health care. But if someone is experiencing mental distress, they're just not doing super well, there's a bit more of a gray area as to how to help that person, because as you mentioned, they're not funded to provide mental health services. And so they're not able to help with kind of just resettling stress. And so a lot of these newcomers, refugees and refugee claimants, have a lot of stress when it comes to resettlement. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have a diagnosable mental health issue, but it does mean that they may not be doing well and that they do need supports to help them through that time period. And so I actually have a bit of a quiz question for you, or not a quiz question, a survey question, just to kind of understand the audience a bit. And so my first question is, do you currently work with refugees or refugee claimants in your work? And then followed up with, when was the last time, if you do work with them, that you saw an refugee or a refugee claimant? So there should be a poll up right now. And I'm probably going to give us about maybe 20 more seconds to answer the poll, and then I think we can wrap it up. But just to continue while we're getting some of those responses in, something that we know from research, something the Mental Health Commission has released, is that refugees do tend to experience disparities in their access to mental health services, quality of care, and health outcomes. And there's a myriad of reasons for that, but something that we would like to do is at this resettlement stage when they're first coming, that's not a reason why they're not getting the care that they need. And to support GARs during this time of transition, we find that it's critical that the right services are available to them during this time. Okay, so now I'm going to ask that we close up the poll and let's see what are results. Okay, it's really great to hear. Okay, so 87% do currently work with refugee and refugee claimants. And so I would love to hear, folks' questions and just how this applies to you, and if you see some of these trends that we're talking about. And 68% of you have seen someone within the last 7 days. Thank you for your responses. And lastly, something that we realized in the phase 1 research of this, which Jack is going to talk about, is that a lot of workers, however, don't have the capacity to support cars in distress. So as we thought about how to create something that supports RAP workers in addressing mental distress for clients, recognizing that there is not a whole lot of capacity for folks, they're overworked, and there's a lot of need, Next slide, please. So for this project, our partners are Costi, Polycultural, and London Cross-Cultural Newcomer Center. And so this project is led by our team at the Office of Health Equity at CAMH. And so Dr. Kwame McKenzie is our PI, and then Jack is a research analyst on the project, and Paulisha helps manage the projects. And Amna is also another manager of ours, and I'm the research coordinator on the project as well. Next slide, please. And so the way that we structured the leadership or the direction of this project is by having a steering committee and advisory committee. And so our steering committee is led by the leadership of each of the 3 organizations that we've partnered with, as well as with CAMH, and they provide some of like the broad stroke direction for how we should do this work. And then we have an amazing advisory committee that helps with the kind of month-to-month project logistics for everything that we do. And then we're supported by 3 research analysts at each site, including Jack. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so this project is taking place over 3 phases and started in January of 2022, and we plan on having it wrapped up by April of next year. And so, as mentioned, the project aims to develop and test a service model for RAP staff to identify and address mental distress among GARs. Next slide. So we talked about the 3 phases of the project. So phase 1 was data collection involving a literature search, document review, and key informant interviews. And so the goal of this was to understand what supports currently exist, what are models that other folks are using, and based on key informant interviews with staff at the 3 centers that we're working with, what do they identify as needs? What do they identify as potential barriers? And what would they like in a model, in the model that we develop? Phase 2, which we've just wrapped up, is model creation. And so it's a really exciting phase to be in and to finish up. So based on all the information that we got from phase 1, actually creating something to support RAP workers in supporting GARs through mental distress. And so what we did was, hearing that there was a lot of like workers were kind of stretched thin at this point, we created a short training strategy. We also heard that there was a lot of turnover for RAP workers, and so we didn't want to do a one-time training or resource setting that constantly needed to be done. And so we did a short training module that introduced a refugee mental health screener, which we'll talk about a bit later, and kind of walk folks through how to start the conversation with GAR clients. And then 3, we're currently in the phase of pilot testing of the model and training of RAT staff on how to use it and evaluate the model's effectiveness. And so right now we've rolled it out at different sites, and we're interviewing folks before and after the model has been rolled out, both RAP staff as well as GAR clients, to understand the impact that this model is having and ways in which we can improve it. Next slide. All right, so now I'm going to pass it on to Jack to talk a bit about phase 1 of this research.
Thanks, Mercedes. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here today. So as Mercedes said, I'm going to talk about the research that we conducted during phase 1, which involved both the literature review and key informant interviews. So in phase 1, with the literature review, we conducted it to explore these 4 questions that we had, really focusing on how mental distress is currently identified within wider work and how it's supported, as well as if there were any models out there that we could adapt and really build on for our training guide. We wanted to understand how the mental distress identification differed from that of mental disorders as well, so that we weren't conflating the 2 in the work that we did. So in our research, we came across several different styles of mental distress screeners, questionnaires that can be used to identify mental distress, and we slowly whittled it down before we selected one for the use within our training guide. There were very limited responses, information within the academic literature that we reviewed around how mental distress is currently being supported. And those existing models that we did find were found to be very lengthy, requiring extensive background knowledge or education, which is one of the barriers that we face working with our RAP partners. When we moved on to our interviews, we were able to conduct 22 interviews across the 3 partner sites that we had, and you can see the breakdown of participants here. So we had 8 each at Costi and London CCLC and 6 at Polycultural. We had some limited demographic data that we collected and found that there was varying levels of experience within this field. We found that a lot of the time there were staff that had stuck around for a very long time or staff that had only just entered the field, with a lack of staff that we interviewed within those middle times, those middle years. So as you can see here, Polycultural had the lowest average time in field at 5.74 years. But 2/3 of the informants that we did interview had less than 2 years actually at Polycultural. So those with the high number of years of experience were really dragging that average up. The same with Costi, 6 out of 8 of the informants had 1 year or less worth of experience. And that continued with London with nearly 50%, well, 50% of their key informants also having less than 1 year of experience within the organization. They held various positions, so crisis counsellor, settlement counsellor, providing different areas of support to the government-assisted refugee clients that they did have coming into their organisations. So within the interview analysis, we created these themes that allowed us to explore the responses. So we were looking at how the staff currently identified distress in their clients, what they would do when they identified this distress, what they perceived they needed in addition to support GARs experiencing distress, and the reasons why GARs go into mental distress. So we found that participants used various approaches to identify distress, which included conversations with their clients or potentially with family members of their clients when their clients weren't comfortable disclosing to them that they were experiencing difficulties, or observations of client behavior. These approaches are found to be time intensive. In the case of observing client behavior, it requires an understanding of how the client acts in a baseline and what changes when they start acting heightened. Clients in distress were most commonly supported through these conversations, like having more in-depth conversations, again, quite a timely intervention, or by referrals to outside supports of these partners. The training that the staff were asking for really focused on their ability to de-escalate clients when they were heightened. And we found that participants believed that the government-assisted refugees were experiencing distress for various reasons, including cultural differences, financial difficulties, trouble finding work, or trouble finding appropriate housing for themselves or their families. I will now hand back to Mercedes, who will go over our model development.
Yeah, hi everyone, great to be back. So based on that literature review that Jack had done, something that did stand out to us was the Refugee Health Screener-15. So this was a health screener that was developed in the US and tested on a number of different population groups. And so we decided to create the training module that guided through individuals through using this Refugee Health Screener-15. And so how to use the screener, as well as what are kind of next steps. And the way that we see the use of engaging with the screener is really as a conversation starter. And so it's not meant to be an evaluation of if you've improved someone's mental health, but it's really about starting that conversation, understanding where they're at, so that you can kind of get a bit of a number and then direct them to next steps. So do you mind going to the next slide? So yeah, so the purpose is to provide RAP staff with an up-to-date and accurate information about mental distress and how to identify it, and then ensure that individual GARs that require specific supports or connections can be identified and connected to it. And so an important clarification that we do make at the beginning of the course is that differentiation between mental distress and mental illness, because I think we often conflate and mix the two up, and then providing them with supports based on how someone might score on the Refugee Health Screener-15. Next slide, please. So the training guide is hosted online and is self-directed. And so it's asynchronous. Folks can do it at any time. And it can be completed within 1 hour. We aimed for 30 minutes, but based on how people go through courses, we estimate it to be within that range. And so the course was designed for RAP staff to provide supports to GARs during their initial resettlement services. However, we do say that all service providers are welcome to complete it, and that while we designed it specifically for this group, we believe it can be applicable to a wide range of individuals. Right now, since, as mentioned previously, we're in the piloting phase. And so right now it's only available to partner organizations. But after this piloting phase, and based on any updates that we might make based on the evaluation, we do hope that it becomes more broadly available all across Canada for folks. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it's self-directed in training, and it goes through this Recognizing Mental Distress, a guide to using the Refugee Health Screener-15. So it goes through, that's the title of it, and it goes through this Refugee Health Screener. And so we talk about mental distress and mental health, how to use this RHS-15 appropriately, and then based on scoring for the RHS-15, what resources you might direct your GARs to. And so right now, the training guide has also been available made available in French. Next slide, please. So this is just what Jack is opening up right now is an introduction video that we have for the training guide that's part of the course.
Welcome to the training course for Recognizing Mental Distress, a guide to using the Refugee Health Screener-15. This online training is designed for those who work with government-assisted refugees within a resettlement assistance program or in other settings. It provides information on how to use a mental distress screener when screening refugees' clients for mental distress. You'll learn how to use a refugee health screener and understand the difference between mental illness and mental distress. You'll also be equipped to talk about the next steps when an individual is experiencing distress. Also included are resources for continued learning. After taking the course, you'll be able to confidently use the Refugee Health Screener-15. You'll know the difference between mental illness and mental distress. You'll learn how to have more conversations about mental distress with government-assisted refugees. And you'll increase your awareness of other resources and tools that will support mentally distressed government-assisted refugees. Once completed, you'll be equipped to have the tools to provide your government-assisted refugees with the next steps to maximize their mental wellness. The screener will also be a tool to have effective conversations about mental distress with your clients. Now, this is a short course. It will only take 30 to 45 minutes to complete, and I'd like to thank you in advance for taking the course and hope that it benefits you in your work in the settlement sector.
Thank you for sharing that. So that's a bit of a snippet, a bit of a teaser of what the course looks like. And to give a few more snippets and teasers, these are just a few screenshots of what the training guide looks like. And so, for example, on the left, we have ways of potentially identifying a mental health concern. And this is just a snippet of what the first few pages of one of our lessons looks like. And so we talk about even like common barriers to folks receiving help, and really try to leverage and kind of ground in that culturally appropriate approach. One of the reasons why we thought it would be really good to use the screener as a conversation starter is because we know there could be a bit of cultural stigma around talking about mental distress, not only for the clients that are being served, but also for the workers themselves coming from a lot of these different contexts. And so we kind of wanted this as an intermediary and an easy way to talk about these potentially sensitive topics. Thank you. So now I'm going to pass it back on to Paulisha for our next steps.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Next slide, please. So as part of the process for our research project, we also are going to be evaluating the training guide / online course in multiple methods. We're going to be looking at how participants have had a change in their knowledge through pre and post test questionnaires. There also will be a survey to evaluate how learners have interacted with the training guide, understand what was successful, what we can improve on. And we're also conducting interviews to better understand how the training guide has improved client service. So we're interviewing with RAP frontline staff. In interviews with the staff, we're going to understand how approaches to their work have changed after they've taken the training guide. We're also going to be interviewing with RAP managers at our partner sites, thinking about how the organization has changed from the training guide being implemented, and then also going to be interviewing with clients themselves. So we have a cohort of clients we will be interviewing with prior to the training guide being taken by staff, and then also going to be interviewing with clients after. Recognize that due to the program setup that these will not necessarily be the same clients, but it is the best way we can use to compare and contrast how the training guide being taken by the staff and implemented, how that's effectively impacted how clients are better being referred to mental health services or having mental distress identified. Next slide, please. So currently we are in the phase where the training guide is in field with our partner sites as of November 6th. And we are collecting data that's going to run until early parts of next year. We will be analyzing that data and writing a final report accordingly. And then the training guide will be updated in April of next year after all of that analysis and everything is completed. And the goal is to update it according to the feedback we heard, and we are going to be then publishing with our partner sites to use at the end of the project. The goal overall is to also have the training guide available broader outside of our partner site. However, we currently are in the phase talking with our steering committee and advisory committee to best understand what is the best way to scale up, considering we're still in the data collection phase. So the training guide overall will link to our larger immigrant refugee mental health project course, and we will make sure we're maintaining it under the IRMHP banner. And like I just mentioned, we are going to be opening it up to all RAP providing agencies. So stay tuned for further information about that. We're just figuring out some logistics currently. Thank you everyone for attending our presentation. If you want to reach out to our team specifically around the RAP project, you can see our email in the top line there. I saw a couple of questions in the chat around our course and our resources related to our immigrant refugee mental health project. You can see the links there to both our English and our French websites. And if you have any specific questions related to our immigrant refugee mental health project, you'll also see listed here the emails there specifically, so you can learn more information as well. So thanks again. And this is a time for folks, if they have any questions, we're happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Paulicia, Mercedes, and Jack, for that very informative presentation, and wonderful to see your reach and the work that you're doing, and lots of interest in the upcoming course. So we'll dive into the questions and see what we have. There's lots coming in. Okay. Clients most often arrive without official diagnoses, but showing a lot of symptoms of mental illness, but have to wait a long time to receive any diagnosis. Any suggestions there?
I can get started, and then if folks want to jump in, they can. We agree that there is significant challenges with folks and with wait times, et cetera. One of the goals of this training guide that we have is to better equip frontline staff with identifying when someone's experiencing mental distress as part of the migration journey, and really need to necessarily be connected to maybe housing supports, maybe they need to be connected to community supports, but they aren't experiencing clinical diagnosis. But also another part of the course that we are embedding is when someone may be experiencing and something psychological. How do you refer and broach that conversation? There's some sample conversation guides we have in the training guide as well to help guide folks, recognizing that people have different cultural expectations around language used around mental health, mental wellness, psychological disorders, etc. So the goal of this course is to help build capacity so people can refer clients to the correct resources. Recognize that the waitlist issue is an ongoing issue that I think as a sector overall, all of us are working towards trying to improve.
Thank you so much, Paulisha. And just to our audience, we will obviously be sharing any of those resources that you've made available to N4 with your attendees. So the next question, are the interpretive services of the Office of Health Equity exclusivity related to service users' interactions with CAMH, or do they extend to some of their immigration processes? And
So I can
say
answer that question as well. So the Office of Health Equity, we have a couple major buckets of work that we do. Some of it is for internally at the hospital. One of that is interpreter services and the strategic initiatives that I also mentioned in one of our opening slides. So we help to ensure that across the entire hospital, people are able to access an interpreter. However, in answering that second part of the question around immigrants and refugees and how they may access interpreter services, I would recommend that if you at your agency can talk to your leadership and see what's available to you. But we also do at CAMH have a New Beginnings clinic, which provides psychological supports for refugees who have arrived within 2 years. So that also is a resource that is specific to the refugee population. And we have a lot of times where we are connecting our interpreters with some of the clients we see there as well.
Fantastic, thank you. How can partnerships with mental health professionals be strengthened to enhance the support provided to clients in mental distress?
Does anyone want to jump in first, or I can keep jumping in?
You're doing great, Paulisha.
So I guess for that question, it's a multiple tiered kind of question, right? In terms of even building that relationship with the mental health professionals before you necessarily need to be leveraging that. So that's something that can be done on an ongoing basis. And our Immigrant Refugee Mental Health Project, our newly launched leadership course, that's some of the conversation that we consider, right, around the organizational level, and thinking about how can we think as a system, as an organization, how we're better connecting with mental health service providers, recognizing that not all settlement services have those connections well established and that we aren't necessarily funded to provide mental health supports. So you'll see some of that capacity building in some of our other courses, and really just thinking about referring to the correct places according to the client's needs. And so some of that is really relationship management, chatting with the client, seeing what works best for them. But if you're looking to better understand how do I broach that topic, etc., I am going to again plug some of our courses that we do have currently available. And then when our RAP project course and Refugee Health Screener is a little bit more widely shared through this project here, that will be an additional resource available for folks to build capacity so they're better able to meet the needs of their clients and appropriately connect clients with the correct mental health professionals.
Excellent, thank you. This individual is curious about the 6 mental distress screeners identified.
Yeah, so I can take that. The ones that we did identify were the Symptom Checklist 90 revised, the Hopkins Symptom Checklist, the Brief Symptom Checklist, the Kessler Psychological Distress Scale, the Refugee Health Screener, and the General Health Questionnaire. And I'll just talk a little bit as to why we chose the Refugee Health Screener. So as Mercedes mentioned, it was built out of and tested within the United States. It is targeted towards refugees, which is the population of interest that we're working with. So right off the bat there, it was an advantage for it. It's also relatively short. It consists of 14 questions and then a thermometer-esque question that can be used for a self-assessment by the participant completing the questionnaire on how they've been experiencing stress in the last week or so. And so it's short length, its ability to be administered by an individual to a participant, or self-administered, or even administered with interpreter, also worked in its favor. And additionally, it comes in multiple translations already. So it's already been translated into French, Swahili, Ukrainian, for example. There are multiple different versions, and each version of them actually has the original English underneath. So even if you personally don't speak that language or read or write that language, you can understand what the question is being asked to the individual completing it in their native language or language that they are comfortable with. So for all of these reasons, we reached out to those that did create it and asked and received their permission to include it in our training guide and to really build our training guide around it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jack, for those additional details. And looks like some of these questions are sort of related. So this one is they were looking for therapeutic techniques when there is a language barrier, which you've touched on. There seems to be a general gap in this support. So are there any other additional directives you could provide to this individual?
Unfortunately, no. I will say that it is something that we did encounter during our key informant interviews. We didn't mention it, but we did have a few times the participants mentioned that they've been taught things to support an individual who is experiencing maybe like a crisis, and found that it's been rather ineffective, maybe because of language barrier or cultural barrier. And so the only thing that I can really recommend, and it sounds pretty straightforward, but is to ask them ask the individual like what they usually do when they're experiencing a time of stress, and really like try to talk it through with them. But beyond that, it has been quite a barrier that we have encountered as well.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, and to make a plug for the immigrant refugee course that Polly Shed mentioned, we do have a section on language barriers. As discussed, interpreters are going to be a really big part of that. And so finding out if you have interpreter supports within your organization. And something that I like about the course is that it also highlights perhaps some common pitfalls or things that we may want to avoid doing that perhaps are knee-jerk reactions. And so I think it could be really good with understanding the do's and don'ts of that. One example it gives that I recall is that oftentimes we may depend on family members or children as kind of impromptu interpreters, and that could be unhelpful oftentimes. And so I would suggest the immigrant refugee mental health course for just some more contextual information when it comes to providing mental health support.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mercedes and Jack. And there are numerous questions coming in for when those courses are available. I'm assuming that that information is found on your website, and they'll be able to get those details following the webinar, so that we can get some individuals into the courses, which are a lot of interest coming in. So the next question, this individual is curious to know if there are some best practices from other programs globally that could be adapted to improve mental health services within the RAP model in Canada.
So I can address maybe a part of that. I did, so as part of our literature review, it was quite an extensive review, but it just found like a very limited academic literature on it. There were a few long-term interventions, I would call them. They required maybe 10 or 12 weeks to be conducted, required meetings for about an hour or two each week. That just didn't fit with what we were trying to do with the training guide. We're really focusing on that initial resettlement period when the refugee arrives. So usually they only spend about 4 weeks in the resettlement center before they move into community and are supported by a different part of the organization. So as a result, when you're looking at an intervention that requires 10 or 12 weeks and serious time each week, it didn't really fit with what we were trying to do. There were a couple that I found that had been promoted by the United Nations along those lines. Unfortunately, the names are escaping me right now. And so there are things that are out there globally. They just didn't fit with the training guide's goals.
Okay. Thank you for giving us that information. Another comment that the training looks really interesting and very relevant. So great to have that feedback. Thank you for attending. Um, is there any training, a guideline available to support the GARs as their mental distress is different yet similar to other clients that we serve?
Um,
Similar kind of question.
yeah. So as I was saying, like we didn't find a lot out there in terms of what was there. Like I was mentioning, those couple of interventions that were like 10 or 12 weeks long. The instructions on how to like the entire guide on how to do them. Specifically thinking of the ones, and I'm sorry, I can't think of the names off the top of my head from the UN. They are available. Those guides are online that you can download and use. They come with like training worksheets and that sort of thing. At thinking of things that are different depending on population, I can't answer that outside of the government assisted refugees, as that was really our focus. Sorry.
No,
Yeah.
that's perfect, Jack. Thank you. Mercedes, you were going to add something.
Yeah, just to add on to that. And I think, and so Jack is absolutely right in that there wasn't a whole lot of resources that we could point to externally. Something that I did find interesting when we did interviews with staff, though, is that when we talked about how they were currently addressing distress among clients, they had a lot of really unique and interesting and I think impactful solutions for how to do that. And so I'd also just add on having while this isn't like a training or a tool, I think starting to have those conversations within our settings to understand perhaps what other workers are doing to address things with their client circle could probably be beneficial. For instance, a few staff had mentioned recommending even extracurricular activities or things like that that aren't just focused on settling in, but also on fostering their own wellness. And that's something that you don't necessarily refer them to an external resource, but it's something that they might have the power to do with the resources that they currently have. And so I think just talking to colleagues can often be really helpful as well.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. I have a couple of comments coming and saying they would like to collaborate. So we're going to have to put you in contact with a couple of these individuals. Thank you for those outreach. And we'll definitely make sure that you are in contact with Jack, Mercedes, and Paulisha following our webinar today. Just seeing if there's anything. This one is, they were wondering if there is a certificate for the training that you're doing. And yes, so if there's a certificate for the training that takes place.
I can answer that question. So for our immigrant refugee mental health project, similarly to this webinar as well, it is accredited. So if you would require a certificate for an accrediting body and for continuing professional development credits, you can do that. For our rapid research project, because we're still in the research phase, it's only in field with our partner organizations. Right now, it's not going to be accredited, but when we do scale it up, similarly to our immigrant refugee mental health project, the goal will be to also accredit that one as well. So you will be able to use those towards your CPD.
Excellent, thank you. We already know our clients are experiencing mental distress. We need more resources to deal with this. You're obviously providing those. Are there any other that you'd like to flag for this individual?
Not necessarily a resource to flag, which isn't helpful to this common question,
Right.
but as we developed this, one of the things that even within our management and our structure was really emphasized is that this is a healthcare system issue when it comes to funding and money and things like that. People's ability to address this shouldn't necessarily only fall on the RAP worker, but that there are wider things at play here. And so in developing the model, we really tried to focus on that limitation and not refer too much to all of these external sources where they would be on a wait list for 6 months to a year and it wouldn't have any impact. And so a lot of the resources that we talk about in the toolkit and next steps are not meant to refer you to things that you may not have access to for a year or 6 months. And it focuses on giving an efficient way to empower workers to kind of address things within their own kind of setting, acknowledging that absolutely a lot of these are healthcare issues. And we probably could do with a bit more funding specific to mental distress for refugees and newcomers.
And just to build on that, some of the things we also do make mention of in the course is clearly delineating that mental distress sometimes is part of the settlement journey, and that referring clients to appropriate supports doesn't have to be within the healthcare system, right? It could be a community support from a community where the person themselves immigrated from, so they can build social capital, right? Maybe they're experiencing distress because of housing issues, or they need further supports on learning English. That's an area they'd like to build upon. So I think also part of it is with the course is thinking outside of the box, and thinking about how within community, how can we better improve the experiences of clients as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I'm just checking to see if there's another question we can squeeze in before we sign off today. There was one, if is it possible to become a partner organization in the study? Is that of interest? Could we put you in contact with this organization? There is definitely a lot of interest, and I will be sharing some additional questions with you following our webinar today. So a partner organization, any interest?
I can answer that really quickly. Because the research project is already in progress, and there's ethics approvals, et cetera, that were required, funding, et cetera, there wouldn't be new opportunities for partnerships for this specific research project. However, are open to future opportunities. So our contact information was included in the presentation itself. So that's where there may be an opportunity, but not specifically in this project because it's already in progress.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, that was absolutely informative, and I know I have lots of other questions for you, as does the audience. But the hour always goes by so quickly, and I just want to say thank you so much to our presenters. I just have a couple of closing slides, and then I'll leave some time for Jack, Policia, and Mercedes to have the last word to our audience. So I'll just dive into this. N4 has recently launched the checklist that you're seeing on our screen for recruiting, integrating, and retaining IEHPs. This downloadable checklist was created with healthcare employers across Canada and can be used by all within the healthcare sector to create a workplace which welcomes and ensures a sense of belonging for all IEHPs. Andrew will pop the checklist link into our chat to share with you. Just a few upcoming dates. So again, a big thank you to our presenters, Paulicia, Mercedes, Jack, for taking the time to participate in today's webinar. And many thanks, obviously, to the audience who participated. We hope to see you at our upcoming events. They're listed on our screen currently. If you missed any part of today's presentation or would like to watch the session again, we'll post the recording on the N4 platform within the next week, and we want to continue this dialogue so that you have a chance to participate. We also have curated several resources related to today's presentation and topic, so you'll be able to find these on newcomernavigation.ca and look for those upcoming learning opportunities. Following today's session, you'll be invited to complete a survey, and we do ask that you take a few moments to complete this, as this information is highly valuable to us in future planning. The app, which I'm hoping all of you are familiar with, check out our N4 mobile app available on Apple and Android devices, and through the QR code here, or by going to newcomernavigation.ca/iOS for Android. And thank you. We hope you can join us again for future N4 events. And as the last chance to chat, I will pass the virtual podium back to our presenters for any last words. Thank you.
Thank you again for the opportunity to present. Again, folks, we will share information about the resources that we do have available. And if anyone is going to be attending the Pathways to Prosperity conference next week, we also will be presenting on the RAP project Tuesday morning. So if you want to come say hi in person, feel free to do so as well. So thanks again. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon, and stay tuned for some of our resources.
Thank you so much. And you're welcome to pop your emails back into the chat box if you'd like, so that individuals can get in contact with you, or we can share that after the fact, because I know there's lots of additional questions. Thank you again. Have a lovely afternoon.
Bye, everyone.